Good morning. Welcome to the panel on fashion and circularity. I'd like to, wait, where's Katrine? She's coming. I'd like to, I'm Jennifer Schenker, editor-in-chief of The Innovator. We're a publication that focuses on innovation and sustainability, two topics that are very much intertwined. I'd like to take a moment to set the scene by just citing 10 very concerning fast fashion waste statistics from earth.org. 92 million tons of textiles are produced every year, and the apparel industry's global emissions will increase by 50% by 2030. The average US consumer throws 81.5 pounds of clothes away every year. The number of times garments are worn has decreased by 36% in the last 15 years. The fashion industry is responsible for 2% of global wastewater. A lot of that comes from dyeing the clothes. 20,000 liters of water are needed to produce just 1 kilo of cotton. $500 billion are lost each year because of underuse and failure to recycle textiles. A very small percentage of clothing is recycled in part due to the fact that blends are used that include natural yarns, man-made filaments, plastics, and metals, and it's very difficult to separate these materials. Nearly 10% of the microplastics in the ocean come from textiles. 2.6 million tons of returned clothing end up in landfills in the US alone. And maybe the most concerning is that fast fashion is now producing 2 times the amount of clothing that they were producing in 2000. So with that as a backdrop, let's just dive into the discussion of, state of play of circularity in the industry. And I'd like to start with you, Gundren, as a representative of Adidas, which is known for its running shoes and sports apparel. You are considered part of the fashion industry. How are you handling the circularity problem?
So for us, this is not a new topic. No? At Adidas, we have started working on creating circular products about a decade ago. The first fully functional running shoe that is a circular product we launched in 2019. After that, several collections, so tens of thousands of products that we call made-to-be-remade products, either apparel or footwear, that are made from one material only. This is a challenge. Yeah, like you said, in the past 20, 30, 40 years, products have been optimized against performance, especially in the sporting goods industry. A running shoe needs to take you through a marathon, or hopefully not one, many. No? Your football jerseys, they need to be functional. They need to have certain composition to enable people to do good sports in them. So for us, going back and actually looking at the material composition and saying we only use one material because we know that one alone can be recycled. The chances are high. No? And this was a decade ago, as I said. So over time, technology has evolved. No? What we have seen is many of our other competitors have done the same thing, just in isolation. Everybody in their basement, in their innovation department, creating what everyone thought is a circular product. This is one of the issues that evolved from that. Circular products are not really defined, and they're not defined as a concept, not yet. However, what happened in the case of our products, we launched all these nice products. Consumers who buy these products, they can scan a QR code on that product that indicates you how you basically can send that product back to Adidas, and we have selected suppliers that accept to receive these products back after use. That's also not easy, because receiving something back after use needs sorting, cleaning, potentially disassembly. It's not an easy process. So after that, this is the nice theory. We know we can make circular products. The issue is really, how do we scale this? how do we collect at scale, how do we sort this at scale, and how do we then make that back into a raw material? And I think this is at the moment the point where the fashion industry, and I think I can speak for a lot of our competitors as well, we have tried a lot in the last few years. There was a lot of romanticism of what circular actually means, and we reached now a moment where we're down to reality. We know what it means.
Thank you for that overview. I think it's worth taking a moment to talk about what circularity means and will mean in the future, because some people might think of it as, say, biodegradable, but that's not really what we're talking about here, right? So can you kind of take a minute to talk about that?
Yeah. So circularity can be different in different industries, but when we look at the product and the purpose of a textile, of a shoe, of an apparel product, there are three things that define a circular product, and this is in alignment with upcoming EU regulation, also with UN definitions. Products need to be durable, they need to be recyclable, and they need to have maximum recycled content in them. This is, in the meantime, this has become quite accepted in our industry, and it will also be where the regulation will drive us when it comes to the eco-design guidelines that the European Commission is working on under the Green Deal. So this, for us internally at Adidas, we have a circularity definition for ourselves. That means the value of products and materials needs to be kept as high as possible, as long as possible, which reflects exactly this.
But as you've mentioned, it's very hard to scale this without an ecosystem. So with that, I'm going to turn to Katrin, who, you know, Fashion for Good is a platform. You work with Adidas. They're one of your founding members. Tell us a little bit about what you do and how you're working with big producers in the fashion industry.
Yeah. Maybe a little bit of context of how we came about six years ago, and this concept of pre-competitive collaboration that Gudrun also mentioned. You know, the challenge is so big, the impacts are so big in the fashion industry. You shared all those numbers. That's a challenge that no one organization can solve alone. So collaboration is key. And next to that, innovation is key, because many of those circular principles you can implement with existing solutions, design guidelines, or even if you think of maybe narrowing the range to produce less, some of those are low-hanging fruits, if you wish. These are existing solutions. But innovation is also key. In fact, if you look at carbon and the road to net zero towards 2050, there's an innovation gap of around 50%. So innovation means new technologies, like we will also hear later on from Patrik, and that's what Fashion for Good is really focusing on. So we need to scale, identify, scout, scale those innovations. And the good news is that the last 5 to 7 years, the interest in circularity and innovation really has exponentially increased. And Fashion for Good alone, I think we have now a portfolio of more than 3,000 innovators that we've scouted and screened. We've supported more than 150, and also more and more brands are getting active. There's pioneers like Adidas, but also in other industry segments, we really have folks that walk the talk and can deal with those innovations, because that's not the traditional approach in the fashion industry, that you think of long-term R&D and lead times and taking risks and paying maybe some premiums. So a lot has progressed, but I think the next frontier, to Gudrun's point, is really how do we scale those solutions that really address those impact hotspots. And those are typically technologies that are CapEx heavy, to have a long R&D lead time, which means that at the beginning at least, those innovations also come with a price premium. And that leads then to brands still being a bit more risk adverse and not really going all in with regards to commitments. Investors, Regeneration VC was on stage earlier, they're very active in that space, but the large scale of investors hasn't been completely active. And what we're trying to do at Fashion for Good, kind of try a little bit our secret sauce, we're trying to orchestrate those different actors in a way that we can unlock those barriers to scaling. So we bring brands together, really pioneers, a very select group. There's around 25 of them that we've brought together. We bring them together with the most promising innovators, Renewcell being one of them. We often try to create consortia where we pool demand, so multiple brands really creating a signal of demand towards the innovators with regards to commitments of materials and volumes. And that then in itself will unlock also financing from investors, because for those investors, the whole story becomes much more de-risked, and they then bring the required financing into the mix so that the innovator can further grow, scale, price premiums drops, so eventually you can really make this whole solution available for more wider spread adoption. So that's a little bit how we work, and I think Patrik will nicely explain these challenges from the innovator perspective in more detail.
Yes, so Patrik, please tell us a little bit about how you're working with the Fashion for Good platform and a little bit about your technology.
Maybe we start with the technology. I mean, we are a textile recycler. We buy today used textiles, and we put that into our plant, and we make a dissolving pulp out of that, which is then sold to man-made cellulosic producers who make new fibers, and then spun into new yarns and new textiles. We have been existing since 2012, but in 2020 we made an IPO in order to raise the capital in order to build the first large-scale plant, which was built in only 15 months and now operational. So we're now operational at a scale of approximately we're scaling it up now to 60,000 tons. We're already 60% loaded in the plant, and we will increase that capacity again next year for another 60,000 tons up to 120,000 tons. The way we work with this is what's important is, and what already have been said, is that offtake agreements, if we want change in the world, we need to start with somebody committing to actually taking those fibers, taking those volumes. Otherwise, you don't get investors who's going to be investing in a company that is asset heavy like ours. I mean, this is not IT in the way you have, 5 or 10 people coming up with a new game or a new pay app or whatever. We know that will not change the world. Fantastic companies, but what we need to do now, as mankind, we need to change our industries, and it starts with companies like Renewcell and Puyuelo as well. I mean, we are the ones that need to do the change. So we are the missing link for circularity.
Thank you. So, David, let me turn to you now, and let's talk about Colliers' approach to the problem and how you are scaling across Europe.
I mean, it's interesting because I think that we have two sets of problems here. One part is technology. I mean, there were some blockers which were technology, but also we are talking here about a value chain development problem and challenge. And in our case, our story has been slightly different. I mean, our story is that we were like a textile classical supplier for fast fashion brands and retailers. And then in 2019, we started like integrating ourselves backwards and developing a waste management business just to fit our operation and make it circular. No? So I think that now it's a reality which is based in mechanical recycling of cotton. We are already delivering like garments at scale. It's around 8 million garments with significant amounts of post-consumer materials. But and the point here is that we see exactly the same problems that you're pointing out. I mean, it's a scale problem. Now we need to develop the whole supply chain in a balanced way. It doesn't make sense that like Patrik is developing 120,000 tons per year plant if there's not a supply in place in sorting for recycling. So I think that this game of scaling up, like consolidating volumes, giving a stability to the market, to the value chain, is super, super important. And this is like perhaps the problem that is composed. No, is technology, is like volumes, is demand, which is like ultra important. I mean, because this is what's giving actually stability to investors and to everybody. And we're in the midst of this game of jumping from one problem to the other all the time. And
can you talk a little bit about how you are scaling the operation in a very, I think, innovative way through collaborations?
I mean, talking about the sorting for recycling business, one of the main blockers that we have is that we don't have enough homogeneous and correctly sorted, and reliable feedstock. So this is a problem that cannot be solved with 1 or 2 plants, but needs to consolidate materials with different plants that share the same criteria. And the criteria comes with technology, I mean sorting technologies, but also traceability. So this is the combination of this expansion plant in terms of the European level of plants sharing the technology. It's like a sort of, it's a mix between a consortium of plants and also a directly owned plants that we hope to be able to feed this newborn industry, And that's the game that we are trying to play.
And where are you on this trajectory? How many of these recycling centers are collaborating with you today, and what's the game plan?
I mean, basically now we have 2 plants that are already operating in Spain. I mean, and then a new one that is being built right now. And then we have a plan of expanding with 5 new plants in 2024-25. So it's mainly Spain because we are very based in Spain, but at the same time we are just trying to have a European ambition so that we can give a service. And actually in the long term, the perspective is that this is waste is a local problem. It doesn't make sense to move materials around in the long run. So, yeah.
So let's talk about the role of regulations in helping solve some of these remaining challenges. So Gundren, normally big companies don't like regulations. What is your feel about the EU Green Deal and the regulations that are coming into play?
Yeah, it seems a bit ironic, but in this sense, I definitely believe that regulation is very welcome in 2 ways. One is, like I mentioned, the definition of a sustainable product. That needs to be set. What is sustainable or circular versus non-sustainable? That is not clear today, and there is a lot of unclarity for the consumer with that. So how do I offer a product to a consumer and tell him in a credible way this is a sustainable product when there is no standard? And that will be solved with the eco-design guidelines coming from the European Union, which we are very glad and looking forward to, honestly. At the same time, this whole back end, and you mentioned it, this entire ecosystem that needs to be built will also be encouraged by regulation. There are 2 things that I could mention. One is in 25, there is already legislation out there on a European level that municipalities will have to collect textile waste separate from the remainder of the waste. So looking at Munich also, I hope you have that on your plan. For us, this is good news because that means textiles would not be mixed in with other waste. That this would be cleaner from the start, and that hopefully there will be an industry developing in sorting that into exactly those qualities that are needed by the recyclers to make actual raw material from that waste. So that is definitely needed, and for us, that ecosystem that needs to exist. And maybe one more point: over the last few years, usually brands have looked at consumers to say, hey, consumer, we offer you these great circular products. Come and buy them and bring them back to us. We are asking too much of people. I mean, we're all consumers and we're all citizens. People have habits. Now, people bring back their old clothes, usually to a charity or a container that is in your street. To change those habits is extremely difficult. And we should really take advantage and be pragmatic of what we have. And also that will be encouraged by, hopefully, a regulatory approach of how textiles and shoes are discarded all over the European Union.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, the role of government and also the role of mindset and consumer behavior. But I know, I live in Paris, and I know that, on my street, there is a container where people know they can take shoes and clothing. We have no idea what happens to it. It probably gets sold off or dumped in Africa. But we already have that behavior of there's a place on the street that I can bring my textiles, and rather than throwing them in the garbage. So it doesn't seem to me that it would be so hard if the municipalities can set up ways to, recycle glass and paper, that to just set up another container for textiles. I think with the renewed sense of the importance of sustainability, I think a lot of people would do that. What do you see as the role of regulation, and what frustrates you, Patrik?
Well, what frustrates me is that the governments and the rule of regulation is so slow. Technologies are there. I mean, we can do this, and we could do it tomorrow, basically. We need to understand that the collection of the textiles actually going to bring a lot of different businesses available. We're going to see companies coming out with sorting technologies. There are already now sorting technologies taking these textiles in, sorting by IR, or AI also coming up now. So it's possible to do that, and it will be a fantastic industry. In general terms, we need to create circularity in everything we do, of course, in consumer goods. We don't have a problem today in gathering and getting the raw materials that we need for the 120,000 ton plant. So we're already buying this, and I think it's also important that they're starting to become companies like ours who can be off-takers. I'm asking for off-take agreements when it comes to the brands, but I'm also willing to give off-take agreements to others who are then developing their technology, who have to invest, and I can set a certain volume with them in order to get them on the way. So I think speed and decisiveness is of essence, really. And why waiting to 2025? Why not getting it done by 2024? Why do we need to have the 1st of January? Why couldn't we do it by summer 24 or so? I mean, we're talking about these problems that we're having, and there's a lot of talk. And you and I talked about before. I've been to these COPs, and I don't go there anymore. It's more frustration than actually actions coming out of that. So I believe that, and as I said in my points, I think the importance here now is to start acting. Technologies are available, business are there, brands are there. We need to get the regulations going and set them, but do it fast. Show some leadership.
And, great point. And, just wanted to get you to also add something you said to me earlier, which I thought was important, that, companies need to stop thinking about circularity as a burden and more as an opportunity.
Yeah. I mean, if we look at the world today, there's not one world leader. Biden talks about it, EU talks about it, Xi Jinping talks about it. Xi Jinping has said that 25% of all textiles in China need to be recycled. And so the business opportunities are there for the fashion industry. The business opportunities are there for all different kind of things that we need to do on the sustainability sector. New batteries, environmentally friendly steel, and so forth and so on. So this is the world's biggest business opportunity. And I think the previous speaker that I was not able to listen to because I was waiting for this panel, she was talking about the 5th industrial revolution. I fully agree. We need to switch from thinking about sustainability as a burden. This is the biggest business opportunity, and they will build some absolute fantastic high-growth companies going forward. So jump on the bandwagon.
Super. Okay, the other 3 panelists, we're almost out of time. Very quickly, your call to action. What more needs to be done? Who needs to do it? Put them on the spot. Katrine.
Well, I think if there are brands in the room, it's about taking the action that Patrik just said. Commit to offtake, play this pioneering role and signal that demand. On the investor side, this is a huge opportunity. This is a huge business opportunity. Regeneration VC has shown that, so others please join in that journey. And I think to the policymakers specifically, there is a lot of exciting stuff in the pipeline with regards to Europe. So this is about actioning it now. If we think of recycling, you need 2 to tango. You need the collection infrastructure and you need the recycling infrastructure. So I think the Waste Directive and upcoming extended producer responsibility are a fabulous foundation for that. If we look at other parts of the world, US, even Asia, they're looking to Europe. We're a pioneer on the legislation side. So I think a lot is in the making. Now it's stepping up a notch and increasing the speed.
Thank you, David.
Basically, I agree with what you have said, but I would just focus it from another perspective, which is stability. I mean, regulation, what will bring also is an stability in expectations and allow everybody to position themselves. And this is, nowadays, is something that unfortunately is not there yet. So.
Okay, and you have the last word.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this has been said. I fully agree with the regulatory part. If I can say something to other brands, also competitors, this is not the time for a unique selling point. No, that's over. Dreaming about circular products and having your unique selling point in a marketing story, that was in the past. Today, it's about doing it. It's actually quite basic. No? It's about simplifying, it's about standardizing, and about joining the crowd and not being alone doing something on the side. So yes, I would all be for join us.
Great. Thank you all. You've all made fabulous points and hopefully inspired people in the audience. Let's have a nice round of applause for them. Thank you.